All right, so very often I get asked the question, can you stop a binge episode while it's happening, for people who have various issues with food and eating? Truthfully, it's very, very difficult, and any therapist would tell you that. You're not going to be 100% successful stopping a binge in mid-binge once you've started. However, you can make progress over time. You need to understand things like impulse and things like habits. So there's an old saying that we use, or that I use in particularly, the chains of habit are too light to be felt until they are too heavy to be broken. So we are creatures of habits, and habits become neural events in our mind. And when they do that, it's so we can respond quickly and react quickly to situations. So we can have habits that are actually negative for us and unhealthy, and we can develop habits that are positive for us and very healthy. Binge eating, obviously, is a negative habit, but it is habit. It is a neural event. So it's something that you're not likely to be able to stop once it begins. And that's because of what we call impulse control. Impulse is that feeling that you have to and that you must. And anyone who's had any kind of dependency on any substance understands how difficult it is to control an impulse. So remember those two things. Habits are neural events in your mind. So it takes a habit to break a habit. So usually the way around the binge experience, no, you're not likely to stop a binge while it's happening. However, try this exercise. As soon as you can, after a binge, start journaling what you're feeling. Journaling is what we call emotional strength and conditioning work. What are you really upset about? What are you really feeling? Forget about the emotional judgment of the binge itself. Get beyond that and just write. And if you're not feeling, you don't know what you're feeling, and you don't know how you're feeling about it, write that down, because it's a start, okay? Even if you can't interrupt the binge episode, you can still try to do so afterwards. This is very, very important to create that takes a habit to break a habit kind of momentum. So even if you don't get to journal immediately after a binge, you feel too exhausted to try or too self-defeated to try, just journal as soon as you can. Put anything to paper and just start writing. Mostly about thoughts and feelings that you have, okay? This gets you feeling out of you, all right? This starts you to get your feelings outside of you rather than pressing them down and then eating them again down the road, eating your feelings again down the road, because that's what binge eating is. So, but journaling once isn't going to change anything any more than doing one aerobics class is going to get you to lose 20 pounds. Consistency over time is what creates that habitual nature where you create a habit to break a habit. You create a positive habit to break a negative habit. So one of the goals we have with this kind of journaling is what's called cognitive disruption or cognitive restructuring. And that takes place over time. It's not something you can do just once. All right, so very, very important. Remember, it takes a habit to break a habit. Journaling is the habit you're going to have to get into to break the habit of binge eating episodes. So without going into detail about a cognitive restructuring and a cognitive disruption, all right, remember these things are designed to change any sabotaging mindsets, okay, toward food, eating, body weight, self-esteem, body image, those kinds of things. You get out of that negative emotional driving behavior, right? Negative emotions that drive your behavior, which leads to impulse control issues, etc. And you challenge that by getting your emotions out on paper and employing the thinking rational brain eventually over time to work the solution, okay? Instead of using negative emotions to obsess over the problem. You see the difference? You start journaling to employ the rational mind, engage the rational mind to empower it to work towards solutions rather than continuing to use the emotional brain to focus and obsess on the problem. So that's the cognitive difference there. And that's what creates the momentum to change a habit, to break a habit. Most exercises you should be doing are going to be about self-discovery, okay? Learning the whys behind the binge, okay? and discovering what's really going on. So what we're talking about here really isn't a food or eating issue. You have to get beyond thinking of it that way, all right? And you have to realize this is an emotional fitness issue. Awareness comes first, and then the desired change in behavior comes down the road. So journaling, strength and conditioning exercise for emotional fitness, and that's what it takes to break that chain of habit of binge eating. So you're not likely to stop a binge episode once it begins, but if you engage the journaling process, you will eventually be doing what it takes to get past it. So remember, weight loss isn't a linear process, and dealing with food issues isn't a linear process either. Sometimes, all the time actually, and you know this from experience, it's a one step forward, two step back process. And that can be a good thing, okay? You can't emotionally just punish and abuse yourself when binging happens, all right? Use each episode, each binge episode as a learning experience, and that's where journaling comes in. Part of this is about getting past the emotional judgment of the binge eating episode itself so you can learn the rational lessons that emotional lockdown that happens when you binge blocks you from learning. So you got to learn these lessons, and the only way you can learn it is by sitting down and journaling. So remember, you binge eat or you overeat or you have a food issue because this behavior has some kind of payoff for you. We call it a secondary gain. So you have to unravel what the payoff is and then learn how to get that payoff without negative behaviors like using food to do so. For example, I had a client who did some of these cognitive restructuring, cognitive disruption exercises. She had a form of EDNOS, what we call eating disorder, not otherwise specified. I'm actually featuring her in one of my upcoming blogs because she dealt with her eating habits, and there were positive physical and cosmetic changes in her body, of course, which helped her body image. But we did the change in the eating issues, okay, not through diet emphasis and food focus, but by getting away from an obsession on food and on diet, okay? And she learned a lot of this by taking my Empowered Woman Experience course a year ago, where we do a lot of these exercises. So the focus was more about emotional wellness and emotional fitness and coping without food, learning to cope without food as a form of substance dependency. So you don't focus more on the thing that you're actually trying to get rid of. You focus on other things that you can concentrate on to help you get rid of it. So very, very important when you're thinking about, can I stop a binge episode in the middle of a binge? No, not very likely. But afterward, when you start engaging the journaling process in terms of getting your feelings out on paper so you're not pushing them down and you're not eating them again later on, you get out of that emotional judgment phase of always judging yourself negatively for even binging to begin with, and you start assessing and taking a look at the binge episode and see it for what it is, see what the payoff is, and learn from it. And then, like I said, awareness comes first, a change in behavior comes down the line. Takes a habit to break a habit. Just follow through all those things. So one exercise you can do, which I have many of my clients do, is 3 simple journaling exercises when something like this happens. 1, food is my enemy because, and then just write, and keep writing until you've answered that question. Right underneath it, food is my friend because, and just keep writing until you've answered that question, and you've got nothing else to say. And then finally, food is just food because, and then finish that sentence and keep writing until you're done. That kind of journaling exercise engages you to address the issue in a way that you can then stand back and look at it and observe it objectively and then move on from there. So that's one way of understanding how to approach solving binge eating issues. Again, you don't solve it by obsessing about the problem. You solve it by working toward a solution, and journaling is the way to do that. Hope that helps.